actually, the time I did that, the first time that you just saw, I went back there and went, what have I done? What came over me? Who am I?
Sally Field has always been the polite, soft-spoken face of Hollywood, which is why her newest revelation hits like a hammer. In a rare moment of unfiltered honesty, she named 6 actors she absolutely hated, and the candor is jaw-dropping. These weren't minor annoyances or on-set misunderstandings. They were deep frustrations she carried quietly for decades. Now the mask is off, and her list is far more brutal than anyone ever expected. Robert Blake's Sally Field had endured challenging sets before, difficult co-stars, tight schedules, and high-pressure shoots. But nothing could have prepared her for the maelstrom that was working with Robert Blake on Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole. Blake's public reputation for intensity was notorious, yet it only hinted at the storm brewing behind closed doors. On set, he was a force of pure unpredictability, a performer whose sense of timing, boundaries, and reason seemed entirely self-governed. Where others followed scripts, schedules, or directorial guidance, Blake followed only his own impulses. From the first day, Sally and the crew sensed that standard rules of collaboration did not apply. He tore through scenes like a live wire, improvising entire monologues that upended the carefully rehearsed dialogue. Lines were dropped mid-scene or replaced with extemporaneous rants that left co-stars scrambling. Moments of silence could erupt into sudden, sharp outbursts. At times, he stormed off entirely, leaving cameras rolling and colleagues frozen, unsure whether to continue or halt production. What he proudly labeled method acting often felt to everyone else like chaos masquerading as artistry. The production crew soon whispered about his temper. 1 minute, Blake could be unnervingly still, as if calculating some hidden strategy. The next, he exploded over a missed prop or a misread line, lashing out in a way that left even veteran crew members flinching. The tension in the room became almost tangible. Cameras, lights, and scripts were irrelevant. What mattered was surviving the unpredictability of his presence. Sally, who had built her career on emotional accessibility and professional collaboration, found the environment disorienting. Her instincts for connection and timing, the tools that made her performances resonate, were constantly undermined by Blake's volatility. Determined to keep the production afloat, Sally tried everything. She maintained professionalism, kept her tone steady, and even attempted to anticipate Blake's next improvisation. But his energy seeped into every frame, derailing scenes and clashing with the emotional arcs she and the director had carefully mapped. Tension bled into the camera's lenses, performances fractured, and what should have been a character-driven drama spiraled into incoherence. Despite everyone's best efforts, the project ultimately collapsed before reaching broadcast, a casualty of the disorder Blake carried with him like a personal signature. Dustin Hoffman. Sally Field had faced her share of challenges in Hollywood, difficult co-stars, grueling shoots, and high-pressure auditions, but nothing quite prepared her for the encounter that would etch itself into her memory. The audition for a now-abandoned project alongside Dustin Hoffman. On paper, it should have been exhilarating. She arrived prepared, armed with character notes, intuition, and the kind of optimism that fuels every performer stepping into a room with a chance to shine. Instead, she walked into an atmosphere dominated entirely by Hoffman, a man whose presence seemed to bend the space around him. From the moment she entered, Hoffman owned the room. Producers chuckled at his banter, assistants followed his lead, and he worked the space like a masterful ringmaster, ensuring every eye was trained on him. When the reading began, the dynamic became painfully clear. This was no collaborative audition. Every line Sally delivered was interrupted. Hoffman questioned her interpretation with veiled sarcasm, loudly critiqued her choices, and frequently redirected the energy of the scene to highlight himself. Each interruption chipped away at her focus. What should have been a shared moment of creative discovery felt like a public dismantling. Sally later reflected on the experience with stark clarity. "It was as if I'd been reduced to a novice in a room where I should have stood as an equal," she admitted. The humiliation wasn't subtle. It was audible, unmistakable, and deeply personal. Every critique felt less like constructive guidance and more like a calculated power play, a demonstration of who truly commanded the space. As the audition progressed, she felt herself shrinking, her confidence being quietly eroded by a man who had already determined her unworthiness. Shirley MacLaine. Audiences adored the on-screen synergy between Sally Field and Shirley MacLaine in Steel Magnolias. The film brimmed with heart, humor, and heartbreak, a delicate balance of laughter and tears that made each scene feel authentic and deeply human. But what moviegoers never saw was the tension simmering behind the cameras, a quiet storm that shadowed every take. Sally Field arrived on set prepared to inhabit Malin with total commitment. The role demanded emotional honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to traverse the full spectrum of grief and maternal love. She expected collaboration, trust, and focus, but Shirley MacLaine seemed to have arrived with a different agenda. From the earliest rehearsals, it became clear that MacLaine's approach prioritized her presence over the ensemble. Crew members quietly whispered about her behavior. She boasted about her awards, challenged direction, and often inserted herself into moments that weren't written for her character. MacLaine's aura on set was unmistakable, larger than life, magnetic, and sometimes overwhelming. Sally tried to maintain her focus, but each scene required not just acting, but navigating around a colleague who seemed determined to dominate the emotional space. Every take demanded vigilance, a delicate balance of staying true to the character while accommodating the unpredictable ripples caused by Shirley's impulses. One of the film's most emotionally charged sequences, a scene that should have been a showcase for Sally's raw grief, stretched across nearly 20 takes. It wasn't that Sally struggled. Her performance was precise, heartfelt, and ready to land. The scene faltered repeatedly because Shirley broke the tone with sarcasm, sly asides, or unplanned gestures, effectively pulling the audience's attention away from Malin's grief. It was as if MacLaine could not tolerate anyone else claiming the emotional center of a moment, and Sally found herself contending not only with the character's sorrow, but with a real-life ego clash that threatened to derail the scene. James Woods. Kiss Me Goodbye promised to be a light, breezy romantic comedy, a film built on charm, chemistry, and playful energy. Sally Field approached it with enthusiasm, eager to explore the comedic timing and emotional subtlety the role demanded. What she encountered instead was James Woods, a performer whose brilliance was undeniable, yet whose intensity could transform every scene into a grueling ordeal. On paper, Woods' reputation for intelligence and craft suggested a stimulating collaborator. In practice, it often felt like walking into an intellectual gauntlet. From the first rehearsal, it was clear that Woods approached each scene not as a partnership, but as a challenge. Lines were dissected with surgical precision, moments were debated like philosophical treatises, and he frequently rewrote dialogue mere minutes before shooting. Rehearsals morphed into sparring matches rather than collaborative work. Every scene became a test of endurance, a psychological chess game where Sally's instincts were second-guessed, her timing interrupted, and her creativity subtly undermined. Sally later reflected that Wood's intellect wasn't inherently the problem. It was the weaponization of it. He had a way of turning even minor disagreements into exercises of dominance, questioning her choices in ways that made her feel small, as though her ideas were naive or insufficiently sophisticated. During takes, he would pause mid-scene to critique her delivery, unraveling moments that should have been organic and effortless. Simple gestures, slight pauses, or inflections became arenas for critique, leaving Sally navigating not just the demands of her character, but the unpredictable judgments of a fellow actor wielding intelligence as authority. Off-camera, the tension persisted. Woods would mutter that she wasn't emotionally committed, implying that her performance lacked depth. Such remarks cut deeper than mere criticism. They echoed against years of hard-won credibility in an industry where women were often judged more harshly than their male counterparts. After decades of earning respect, Sally felt herself defending not just her character, but her right to be respected as a professional. Every conversation, every interaction became emotional labor, draining her energy before she even stepped in front of the camera. By the end of the shoot, Sally described the experience bluntly. She wasn't exhausted from acting, from comedy, or from emotion. She was exhausted from defending her right to act. The creative challenge she had anticipated was eclipsed by the constant negotiation of ego, power, and scrutiny. She left the project with a quiet but firm resolve. She would never allow another performer's brilliance or ego to overshadow her own voice. Kiss Me Goodbye became a lesson in boundaries and resilience, a reminder that collaboration in art requires mutual respect, not domination. Burt Reynolds. Long before the tabloids hinted at trouble, Hollywood had anointed Sally Field and Burt Reynolds as the ultimate power couple. Their chemistry seemed effortless, a magnetic force captured in every photograph, every interview, every on-set glance. When cameras rolled on Smokey and the Bandit, they were electric, exchanging flirtatious smiles, playful banter, and a warmth that made audiences believe in a fairy tale romance. To the world, they were untouchable, glamorous, enviable, and perfectly in sync. But the Sally who laughed under the studio lights was not the Sally who returned home. Behind closed doors, Reynolds's charm carried a sharper edge. What seemed like humor in public often had a sting in private. Sally later revealed that his playful jabs masked a controlling intensity. He could nitpick her appearance with a seemingly offhand comment that lingered like a shadow. He questioned her decisions, directed her actions, and subtly undermined her accomplishments. Little remarks about her acting, her looks, or her opinions, easily dismissible to anyone else, became daily reminders that she existed in the orbit of his dominance. Even as she achieved professional triumphs, the spotlight she commanded on screen could not penetrate the tension at home. Reynolds alternated unpredictably between affection and withdrawal, leaving her perpetually uncertain which version of him she would encounter. One moment he could be tender, praising her with a rare, soft intensity. The next, cold or sarcastic, leaving her scrambling to regain his approval. The pattern of closeness followed by distance became exhausting. Over time, Sally felt herself diminishing under his gaze. A brilliant woman who had to shrink to fit the confines of his ego. In her memoir, In Pieces, she described the suffocating dynamic in painstaking detail. She was present, yet never allowed to inhabit her full self. Conversations with Burt often left her silenced or corrected, opinions dismissed as trivial, choices questioned as if she were incapable of independent thought. The man celebrated by millions, charming, charismatic, seemingly benevolent, was not the man she faced in the intimacy of their home. That version of him left her anxious, second-guessing, and emotionally depleted. Tommy Lee Jones. When Sally Field agreed to star in Back Roads, she envisioned a deeply intimate, character-driven story, a film where emotional subtlety and chemistry would carry every scene. She imagined a collaborative atmosphere on set, where vulnerability could be shared and performance could flourish through connection. Instead, she encountered an unexpected and disorienting wall. Tommy Lee Jones. From the first day of filming, it became painfully clear that Jones treated the set like a fortress, and anyone who approached him, actors, crew, even the director, like an intruder. His presence was precise, efficient, and utterly isolating. He spoke rarely, never smiled in casual conversation, and seemed to exist in a different realm from the rest of the cast. Greetings were perfunctory, camaraderie was non-existent. He hit his marks with machine-like accuracy, delivered his lines with the coldness of a stopwatch, and vanished almost immediately afterward into the privacy of his trailer. To Sally, whose craft depended on emotional interplay and reciprocal trust, this behavior felt suffocating. The set became a place where her instincts were stifled, where the vulnerability required for authentic performance was systematically denied. Determined not to be defeated, she tried to break the ice. She asked questions about his interpretation, offered ideas for scenes, and even tried light-hearted banter between takes. But each attempt was met with the same icy detachment. No feedback, no acknowledgement, no engagement, just the continuing silent wall of Tommy Lee Jones. The warmth she expected from a partner in performance was replaced by a constant, subtle message. You do not belong here. She later reflected that the experience made her feel as though the entire set revolved around him, that his presence alone determined who had the right to occupy the space. Off camera, the isolation was invisible to critics and audiences, who later lambasted the film for its lack of chemistry. What they couldn't see was that the problem was not on-screen magic failing. It was the relentless emotional distance he maintained behind the scenes. Acting opposite Jones, she said, was like trying to build a bridge while the other person tore out the planks behind you. Every moment of potential connection, every spark of emotional risk was met with withdrawal, leaving her performance suspended in a cold, solitary space. What do you think about the actors who have conflicts with Sally Field? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.